Hey, what's up, guys? And today we are going to be discussing a little bit of the Blackwater branch's development. This is a long time coming, and I have been needing to make a devlog for the route for a long time, especially on this channel. So sit back, relax, and yeah, let's discuss on where we are with the Blackwater branch currently, shall we? So, where to begin, honestly? Well, I guess the first thing we need to start off with is what's been going on with the route since I released it on March of 2025. Or, well, in March of 2025. So, for those of you that don't know, the route has been in development since February 20th, 2020. And on March 20th, 2025, I actually ended up releasing the route to the general public. Now, granted, this is a very rough and ready version of the route with a lot of gaps in scenery and still a lot of things to be worked on, including the track work, which I actually have updated as of late. So there will be a updated version of the route going live soon. I can't put a date on it just yet because I don't know how much I'm going to put in there that needs to be updated or just needs to be changed out. But with that said, there has been a lot in terms of just the actual development side of things. Keep in mind, I've been developing this route for 6 years, and it's one of these projects that quickly becomes a passion project for myself, because that's what it started out as when it was first being developed as the Academy Corridor. For those of you that don't know, and I wouldn't be surprised if many of you don't know, I was developing a route called the Academy Corridor, which was set in the same universe as this route. Basically, this route is set in a universe of an anime that's based. So it's based off of fanfic that's based off an anime that I watched in 2015, which is where I got the idea for the route in the first place. So there's that. I'll go a little bit more into detail about that in a future video, but the long and short of it was that the Academy Corridor was my first attempt at route development, and this was back in 2018. A couple years later, I got the opportunity to take over this route from a friend of mine who was leaving the TS community, and I took over the route in February 2020 and started developing from there. And the route has come a long way since then. Huge areas of the route has been developed. A lot of key areas have been expanded, and a lot of trackage and mileage has been added. And not the least of which was recently just rebuilding the entire main line just outside of the main hub of the railroad, which was Stovall. So there's two main hubs of the railroad. There's Blackwater on the far eastern end of the route, and then there's Stovall, which is on the far western end of the route. Stovall has the direct connection to the mainline tracks that go as far as Elvenwood to the north, which is about 20 miles, and down south about 40 miles, 40, 30, somewhere around there. I haven't judged on the mileages yet, but Chadsworth, a big mining community, is also down south. And this is kind of tied into the route's history and whatnot, but that's gonna be a future expansion in the distant future, honestly, not the near future. Is that I'm gonna expand the mainline trackage up north about 20 miles to get to the city of Elvenwood, which is a big major rail hub in the route, in the in-universe lore. Now, this also means that track work has to be set up for high-speed running, and that's what I was trying to do for the life of me. And so far, I've gotten some of the track work to rework into locomotives going about 65 miles an hour safely without derailing, but there's been some issues trying to get the super elevation to work, and I've never really worked it out too well. And there's several key areas I want to keep intact and all this kind of stuff, so the mileage may vary on how fast these trains can go. But the general speed right now is about 65 to 75 miles an hour on the tracks, on the main line. And the general speed limit on the branch line, the Blackwater branch itself, was around 40 miles an hour to 35 miles an hour on several key areas of the route, with a few areas going down to 20 to 25. So it depends on where you are on the route, and there's still a lot of work to be done. Speaking of track work, I have updated the layout a little bit of some areas, not the least of which was the Shandor Mines, which now has a wide track added to it because I couldn't turn around many of the larger locomotives that I was using over there. And the Blackwater Power Station, which was a fairly new development in terms of like actually developing the route. Actually, a year and a half ago now, I added that little branch line to it. And it was basically just a power station where you could go out onto through the Blackwater rail yard and continue your run up to a wide track that allowed you to get back out onto the main from there. But I decided that this is kind of boring. I decided to make another spur track that went further up north to a power station where you could drop off hoppers full of coal. So it gave a complete chain of various industries there for people to really work with. Now, granted, that's only like a small portion of the track work that's been done. The other thing that's been being worked on has been the scenery. The scenery itself has been reworked quite just slowly, but enough where it's like actually getting to a point where it's pretty significant. The most interesting thing, though, that I have been working on was, again, right around the main line outside of Stovall. I actually raised up the terrain to make it look more mountainous because this is in the heart of the mountains. This route is meant to be the heart of the mountains in this universe. And I decided that to make it look more mountainous, I was going to raise the terrain a bit even higher. Initially, I didn't intend to raise it this high up, but I was like, okay, this looks actually pretty decent, and kept going with it. And there's going to be several key areas on the route where a lot of that is being reworked. Another area in particular is around the town of Eureka, which is another key area on the map, or on the route. That is also getting some hills and terrain added to it to make it look a little bit more mountainous and a little more hilly. And then you've got areas like Blackwater, which is also going to be a little bit more reworked and allow for a bit more terrain in the background to kind of hide the fact that it's very flat outside the borders of the map. And that's something I've always had trouble with to really get the feel of the route, was to put it in a place where if you traveled far enough away from the train, you wouldn't just see just barren wasteland of just like nothingness away from the train. Like, it wasn't meant to be kind of like a diorama situation. It was meant to be a full-on like scenery-esque sort of, like you could travel to one end and the other, and you can actually see like, oh yeah, that's where this connects up, that's where that connects up, and so on and so forth. But for the life of me, it took forever to build a lot of the areas up. The cities in particular in this route have taken so much time, and so many different route assets are used because of it, that leads into the other problem with the route lately. And that is how much I've been using for scenery assets. For the last couple of years, the intention was to actually make this so it was a small sort of like minimal requirement route that didn't need many assets to run. That ballooned pretty quickly when I started using various other routes for scenery purposes. The latest addition is actually the Cascades route from Railworks America, which is a payware route, probably one of the few payware routes available on Railworks America that I've been using. There's only 2 payware routes on Railworks America, and this is one of them. Now, the reason I was using it was because of the catenary system that's needed for the main line. But as I start looking into this a little bit more, I realize that Pipestone Pass uses some of the exact same assets, and I have not used that. It makes it easier for people to get, because again, Railworks America tends to be a bit of a finicky mess when it comes to actually getting to where you need to get certain assets and everything. In fact, that was the other thing. Half my assets that I've been using for the Blackwater branch have been coming from Railworks America as part of other people's assets. And I've been debating on whether or not I need to replace a lot of these, or even just removing them altogether and just making my own. And there's just one particular area, the Blackwater Railroad Museum, that I really do need to consider actually keeping. But it's going to need me to actively just either model something brand new to allow it to look decent, or basically figure out which asset pack it's from and then just set that as the main requirement and everything else is secondary. But a good chunk of the requirements, such as Bessemer Lake Erie, that's another one that's required. That is going to stay the same because it's freeware and it's easily accessible from the Railworks America site. But there's a good chunk of those assets, most of them just scenery assets, that are like, why did I even put this in here when I need to like cut down on the amount of assets? The latest sort of example of this, well, not the latest, it's actually one of the first examples of this, was the pump jacks that are featured in the Blackwell Fields. And yeah, these little pump jacks have been a pain in the ass to find a good replacement for. I need them to be featured on the route, of course, but the ones I found were part of a Czechoslovakia asset pack that's like 3 gigs to download or something like that, and you need an account to log in. It's all this kind of wonky little stuff, and to me it's like, I've already made like a station platform and some signs along the route. Why can't I decide to either commission somebody to make this for the route, or make it myself and learn kind of animation and all this other kind of stuff? And I've been debating on whether or not I could need to commission somebody to like actually make and animate one of these pump jacks. But at the same time, it's also something like the route itself is going to need a lot of like these custom scenery assets over time to replace a lot of the freeware stuff that I've been using this whole time. And I really do need to consider, and this has been an actual valid complaint from a few people that have actually downloaded the route. There's been some valid complaints about the fact that there's so many assets required. And this has been a problem for many Railworks routes in the past, is the amount of assets required to run a single route. Keep in mind that with many routes in Railworks, you actively need to purchase additional route content or locomotive content to run a single freeware route, because a lot of them don't come with the scenery included. A lot of them are just basically reusing assets from other routes, so you're going to have to buy them or make them yourself. And that was kind of the big problem there. So I just need to go through the asset list and continue reworking a lot of stuff. The main thing I really want to rework is that pump jack setup. Because, again, like, that's using an asset pack that's, like, very, very few things from it are being used in general. You've got pump jacks, a handful of buildings, and that's about it. I think the only other thing that's used quite heavily is the corn, which was part of that asset pack as well. And it's like, why am I even using this? This is just like, I could probably make this in 2 seconds. But yeah, there's a lot of issues with how much I'm using in terms of freeware and payware, and I really do need to go through and figure out what I need to remove. But aside from that, there's been some other developments as well. So the other big thing that I've been trying to work on, along with the track reworking and scene replacement, has been scenarios. There's been a handful of scenario ideas that I've had. Like, this route was meant to be a DLC size route. That was the big thing. It was meant to be DLC size with rolling stock, locomotives, assets, scenarios, all this kind of stuff. And I've already, and during one of the videos on Virtual Railfan Productions, or, well, this channel, depending on where you're watching this, I actually went ahead and showcased one of these scenarios that is presently in the works. It actually has to be reworked entirely now because of the track work and everything. But it showed a basic operational headache nightmare thing where you have to double the hill just to get out of Stovall with a heavy train with a single locomotive. This would have been back during the early days of the route, and traffic would have been even smaller than it eventually became. So you've got a lot of like little operational headaches and little scenery assets that will be used in there that kind of tell the story of the route in a bit more detail and kind of introduce the player into how this world operates, how this world feels and everything. And it should come with a manual eventually as well. Once I get to the point where I feel like the route is in a pretty much finalized state, I've always had plans to release a manual with it as well to kind of give a detailed information about the route, kind of going off with the history and everything. And there was also the fact that I also plan to make videos, dedicated videos, talking about the route's history, some of the locomotive histories and stuff like that. And one of the locomotives in particular, Titan, that locomotive has been finished, ready to go. It's a small SW1200 with a nameplate plastered on it. And it's been finished and ready to go for a while. And the only thing that's been hampering me from releasing that lately has been the fact that I need to write down the README in terms of how to install it and how to get all the information. In fact, actually, it's the installation portion of it that needs to be finished up. Everything else was done. So that's going to be probably released within the next couple of weeks after this video is posted. I will link it in the description later on once it's been released to kind of allow you guys to take a look and mess around with it. But that's one of the few things that needs to be really worked on at this point that needs some more just general work. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching and listening to this little devlog. Link to the Discord is in the description below, and links to all the channels are also listed down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.